Thanks for checking out another video in our client education series. I'm John, owner of Cabinet Painting Vancouver. Here's a situation a lot of you have probably been in, or you're about to be in if you're watching this video. You want your cabinets painted. So you head to Google, browse a few sites, get some information, reach out to a few companies, and then you're sitting there looking at these two quotes for the exact same kitchen, but one's $2,400 and the other one is $7,500. Most people's first instinct is that one company's ripping them off and the cheaper one is the obvious choice. Or that if you choose the higher quote, you might be overpaying. But the truth is a lot more nuanced than that. And just a heads up, this video is going to be a long one. But refinishing your cabinets is kind of like buying a used car. There are some less than reputable people out there, some pitfalls to avoid. You want something to last you years despite all the abuse. The cost of doing anything is significant, and the risk of choosing wrong can lead to a massive and expensive headache. So you're very smart to be here, spending a little time to become an informed buyer. By the end of this video, you're going to know exactly what's inside each of those numbers, what you're buying, what you're not buying, and which option actually makes sense for your situation. I'm also going to give you a set of crucial questions to ask to get to know where a service provider you're considering sits in the spectrum. I want to be upfront. It's not a sales pitch. There are actually situations where the cheaper quote is the right call, and I'll tell you when that is. What I don't want is for anyone to make either a $7,500 mistake or a $2,400 mistake because they didn't know what they were actually buying. Let's start with the $2,400 quote. You've got a medium-sized kitchen and $2,400 feels like a reasonable chunk of money, especially since it's just painting, right? You could get 3 or 4 entire rooms painted for the same price. And the cabinets, they only take up a fraction of one room. The company has a decent looking website, 7 5-star Google reviews. They seem somewhat responsive, so you give them a shot. The quote is 1 page, and the contract has a few vague paragraphs that they probably wrote themselves. So the day of the job, they show up a little late in an old truck with tools piled up in the back. No uniform, just a paint-covered shirt with a paint store logo on it and paint-covered pants and shoes to match. There's no formal introduction, no walkthrough with you beforehand to confirm what's being done, they just get straight to it. Now, the most important step in any cabinet refinishing project is prep. Before a single drop of paint goes anywhere, every surface needs to be thoroughly degreased, aggressively sanded, and completely cleaned of dust. Done correctly, this alone takes at least a day on a medium-sized kitchen. It's the foundation that everything else sits on. And time is money, and they aren't making much at $2,400. So some of these steps are going to get rushed, or maybe even skipped entirely. The primer goes on by brush and roller, leaving brush marks, roller texture, streaks. You might see a sprayer used at this price point, but likely not. It requires about a day of careful and meticulous masking of the entire kitchen. Plus they're expensive and can be a liability if you aren't well trained to use them. The doors are done right there in your kitchen, which means they need a lot of room. Creates a lot of mess, and dust from your home is settling into the wet surface as it dries. They said they could do it in their shop, but mentioned it was actually just their garage. They had mentioned they'd fill the dings and scratches before priming, but when you look closely, most of those spots are still visible or not filled at all. Maybe they used some soft drywall compound instead of Bondo. Maybe they didn't sand it back properly. Either way, you can just still see them under the primer. The top coat goes on the same way. Brush and roller, doubling up the texture, doubling up the brush marks. When they put the doors back on, the doors are all visibly out of alignment. When you mention it, they spend a few minutes kind of half-heartedly adjusting them, but they're still not quite right. You ask them to fill the old hardware holes from your existing handles, and while they did fill them, you can still see little divots where the filler sits below the surface, and the filler wasn't even fully sanded flat. When they drill new holes for the new hardware you bought, a couple of them are slightly off. On one door, you can see they actually tried to adjust the hole after the fact and made it a bit bigger, but the handle doesn't cover that enlarged hole. You can see some drips and some things stuck in the paint. The whole thing just kind of looks like you could have done it yourself. You raise some of these issues. They kind of explain them away, tell you to look better once everything settles, and they can come back to fix anything that doesn't look good. And they let you know they're going to need final payment that day, and you pay. When they leave, you notice they've twice moved your fridge, fully loaded by dragging it across your hardwood floor, leaving dents and scratches across the kitchen, but they're long gone. Over the next few days, you try to reach them to come and fix the issues. They don't pick up, so you just write it off. It's not worth the confrontation, and honestly, you'd rather not have them back in your home. The whole experience was kind of a mess. Then you start to actually use the kitchen. The cabinet doors are sticking to the frames when you open them, and when they pull free, they take a little paint with them, sometimes from the door, sometimes from the frame. If you accidentally catch a drawer front with your fingernail while you're opening or closing it, it easily chips the paint off, and you can see the old cabinet color underneath. Within the first month, the finish is chipping all over the place. Your partner spills coffee down the front of the cabinet, and no matter how hard you try and clean it, the stain won't come out. And whenever you cook, the oil that splashes onto the cabinet surfaces seems to stain it almost on contact. Plus, when they reinstalled the drawer fronts, some of them rub together, also taking off the paint. About 6 weeks in, you call the company that gave you the $7,500 quote to ask if they can come out and, just kind of touch things up or somehow fix the work. And they tell you, as gently as they can, that they can't just patch work that's failed at this level. They explain that a paint coating is only as strong as its weakest link. If they spray over the existing finish and make it look good, the cabinet adhesion will still be weak where the first company's primer meets the cabinets, and it will compromise their coating too. The previous finish needs to be completely stripped before they can even start. That's going to add a minimum of $2,500 to the original quote. And depending on what's under there, it might actually be cheaper to replace the doors entirely. It'll give you a clean substrate that they can fully stand behind with a proper warranty and a much nicer finish. So after this, you're furious, and you have every right to be. It seemed like a real company. It seemed like a legitimate quote. $2,400 seemed reasonable at the time, but now it just feels like a liability. How does it end up like this? Now let's say that story happened to your cousin, and you watched the whole thing go down, and you decided you were going to do it differently. You're not looking for cheap, you want this done once, you want it done right. Your kitchen gets used hard every day, and you keep your home immaculate, so you'd rather pay more up front than spend years regretting a shortcut. You knew it wouldn't be cheap, you just want to know that you're paying for a real solution. So you ask a designer you know for a recommendation. She's worked with a few refinishing companies, and she points you towards one she trusts. You look them up, the website has over 100 Google reviews at 4.9 stars. They have videos walking through their actual process, not just polished marketing content, but real explanations of what they do and why. There's a portfolio section with detailed project write-ups. Their pricing is explained openly online. There's no mystery at all. So you call, someone picks up immediately. They're friendly, they get you in for a quote the next morning, and they show up on time. The quote that they send is detailed. Photos of your kitchen, a breakdown of exactly what's going to be done, and answers to the questions your cousin told you to ask. They explain the products and the process clearly. They offer a lifetime guarantee against coating failure, and they'll leave touch-up paint with a QR code linking to a how-to video showing you exactly how to touch up your cabinets should accidents happen. But wait, what's that? They even offer free annual touch-ups so that you can keep your cabinets looking immaculate no matter what life throws at them. So far, it sounds pretty good. Oh, but the price, it's actually still a bit more than you anticipated. You and your partner just decide to wait about 6 months until the timing works better financially. So eventually 6 months comes around, you call back, the same person answers. She remembers your name, she remembers all the details of your kitchen. She says the quote's still valid, so you go ahead and sign. The contract is thorough. It outlines the quality control process at the end of the job, and there's a section on dispute resolution that actually seems pretty fair to both parties. On the start day, the crew arrives on time. They use an air sled to move your appliances, which is kind of like a hovercraft that easily glides an 800-pound fridge across the floor without any damage. They seal off the entire kitchen so that dust stays contained, and you actually don't even have to empty a single cabinet. The door and drawer fronts are removed and taken to their shop, an actual shop, where they'll be spraying your doors alongside brand new custom cabinetry using the same professional grade equipment and the same products. The work being done in your kitchen is clean and organized. When the crew finishes on site, they clean up thoroughly. And the finish on the cabinet frames is hard to the touch, visually flawless, and buttery smooth. It's like it came out of the factory that way. The doors come back a couple days later as scheduled. The old hardware holes are completely invisible. You genuinely cannot find them. New holes are drilled using what looks like a precision jig, and every single piece of hardware lines up perfectly. The team spends time adjusting every door until the gaps are consistent on all 4 sides. And then the project manager finally walks through with you at the end, flags a few small things before you even see them, and touches them up promptly. They go over the aftercare instructions, leave the touch-up paint, and confirm that your paint color is on file at the shop should you ever need anything down the road. They remind you again about their lifetime warranty against any complete failure of the coating, and that you can always call for free annual touch-ups. The finish is already cured and ready to use from day one. Payment processes seamlessly off the card they have on file. The receipt just arrives in your inbox. About a year later, you accidentally clip the edge of a cabinet door with a cast iron pan. You call the company, and they pick up. They schedule a visit and just come out to fix it. In the end, you're glad you didn't shop for the lowest number. I want to be clear about something before I get into this. I'm not using those stories to dump on smaller companies or owner-operators that are just starting out. What you just heard are actually a composite of real situations that clients have shared with me over the years. The point isn't that the $2,400 company is dishonest. The point is that those outcomes are the predictable result of a very specific set of economics. Here's the reality. The core cost of doing cabinet refinishing properly, with skilled labor, professional grade materials, a commercial space, liability insurance, workers' comp, those costs are largely the same whether you operate in Surrey or West Vancouver. The only way to charge $2,400 in this market is to not have those things. It's not a judgment call, it's just arithmetic. Labor is the majority of the cost in any quote you receive, at any price point. A cabinet grade finish, the kind that will hold up to the daily abuse in a working kitchen for years and look and feel like new high-end custom cabinetry, requires years of dedicated practice to execute consistently. The gap between a trained, experienced finisher and someone who picked up a spray gun recently is huge. And it's completely invisible to you on the day of installation. It shows up between 30 to 90 days. The low-cost providers can't afford skilled, experienced staff on payroll. Payroll comes with payroll costs, WCB contributions, a need to supply consistent full-time work. Instead, they'll often bring in untrained help through Craigslist and pay them improperly as subcontractors, which means no WCB, very little training, no accountability, and high turnover. Speaking of accountability and experience, a major point of experience comes from those occasions where a refinisher did everything right and inexplicably still have a serious coating failure. It happens. The people who have just put up their shingle have less to lose by screening those clients' calls when they come in, and they never learn from the experience. The people who've invested their life savings in building a finishing shop, hello, and they're in it for the long game, will dig into the problem and find out what went wrong because their livelihood depends on it. They'll make it right, and in doing so, learn how to mitigate those issues so they never happen again. That's how you get consistent results in a trade where so much can potentially go wrong. Now, there's broadly two categories of products used in cabinet refinishing. The first is what you'll find at retail stores. Product lines like Cabinet Coat, Emerald Urethane, or Advance. These are water-based, they're low VOC, and they're widely available. But despite the marketing, they're not designed for long-term use on cabinets. The primers available there also present a few issues. They lack the serious adhesion needed, are prone to many issues with contaminants, and don't seal in stains that will come through the finish like red dye stains, wood tannins, or grease residue. These products also take about 30 days to fully cure, and during that window they remain soft and tacky, which is exactly how you get those doors sticking to frames and paint peeling when you open a cabinet. Even once fully cured, they're simply not engineered to withstand constant cleaning, oil exposure, chemical cleaners, and the daily physical abuse that kitchen cabinets take. And they don't have anywhere near the same hardness or scratch and abrasion resistance. The second category of products are industrial grade 2K finishes. The 2K refers to a two-component system, a hardener that gets added to the product before application. That hardener gives the finish a level of hardness, adhesion, stain resistance, and chemical resistance that retail products genuinely can't touch. These products are typically available only to the cabinet finishing trade. They require a commercial space to be purchased and applied due to health and safety regulations. And they also need specific equipment and training to use. The cost difference is real. Where a retail store primer or top coat might run around $70 a gallon, the industrial grade equivalent is usually $150 to even $200. That's before you factor in the very expensive equipment required to apply it properly. Beyond labor and materials, there's a layer of costs that dedicated refinishing companies carry and low-cost providers typically don't, or at least not to the same extent. A commercial shop with rent and utilities, liability insurance, WCB coverage, vehicles maintained to a professional standard, staff training programs, uniforms, project management systems, warranty follow-ups, aftercare, or a CRM system that lets someone remember your name and your paint color 6 months or even 6 years later. Now, none of that shows up as a line item in your quote, but all of it together is what determines whether there's anyone accountable on the other end of the phone when something goes wrong. One more thing worth understanding is that cabinet refinishing is genuinely one of the hardest painting applications that exists. No surface in your home takes more daily abuse. They get slammed, scratched, exposed to heat, steam, cooking oil, cleaning chemicals, and abrasive sponges. And that's 3 times a day for years. Getting a coating to adhere properly to previous finished and used cabinets is technically demanding. There are stains, Cooking oils, wood tannins, red dye from original finishes, those will all bleed through standard primers no matter how many coats you apply. And achieving a finish quality that actually looks factory grade requires years of mastery combined with a dust-free, temperature and humidity controlled environment. And because the original cabinet surface itself is hard and non-porous, the margin for error in the prep is almost zero. See, cabinet refinishing is one of those things that's really easy to get into, and it's just as easy to make a catastrophic mistake. And the way to fix those mistakes, as your cousin found out, is horrifically expensive. I know I said at the start that this wasn't a sales pitch, so here's the honest breakdown. What things actually cost in your area can vary a lot. We professional finishers have groups online where we compare costs from time to time. Even amongst the companies using 2K finishes and offering a really high quality product, the costs vary a lot by region and provider. So it's always best to get a few data points and dig into the companies in your local market using our questionnaire to get a better sense. So where does that lower cost option actually make sense? It might be right for you if you're planning to sell the home in the next 1 to 2 years and you just want a cosmetic refresh, not a long-term finish. You have a genuinely tight budget and you're going in with realistic expectations about the lifespan and are okay with a brush and rolled finish. Or you personally know the person doing the work, you've seen examples of their jobs that have held up over time, and you're comfortable with the risk profile. But keep in mind that these providers charge you as the client less than the actual base cost that a professional refinisher would go through in labor and materials alone. So they're cutting a lot of corners to get to the final product. If you're really doing your homework and you're getting multiple quotes, you'll probably get some that come in a mid-range. These will often ideally be skilled and reputable residential painters. They'll likely still use retail store products, but they should have the skills and the budget to execute on the prep and achieve a decent looking finish. Often they might hand paint the frames and boxes, but they'll ideally spray the doors. The spraying might happen in your home, which will take up a lot of space and it's gonna compromise on the finish quality. But this option is good for you if you're on a tight budget, you don't expect an immaculate finish, and you're okay with touching up the cabinets yourself fairly often. Don't expect more than 2 to 3 years before the finish starts to show some serious wear though. The higher cost option is worth it for you if this is your long-term home and you want a finish that will really last. You keep your kitchen in good condition and you notice and be bothered by early chipping or staining. You want someone accountable if anything goes wrong, whether it be a year from now or 5 years from now. And you'd rather pay once and just be done rather than to risk having to pay twice. Just make sure you dig into the questions that we're going to provide to make sure that they're actually a professional refinisher using 2K products and have a well-defined prep regimen and a well-established track record. See, the best quote ultimately isn't the cheapest or the most expensive. It's the one where you fully understand what you're paying for. It's very human to focus on cost as the primary decision criteria, but this is one purchase where it's more important to consider the cost of not choosing the right person for your project's goals. If you want a professional finish to last for years and it's out of your budget, sometimes honestly the best thing to do is just to wait until you have the budget, because opting for a cheap solution can end up costing you a lot more in the long run. Now, I promise to provide a set of questions to ask before you hire someone to take on your cabinets, so here it is. I'll put the list on the screen briefly so you can screenshot it if you'd like, but there's also a link in the description so you can get the full document there. If you're actively comparing quotes right now and want to understand exactly how ours would stack up in comparison, our costs, our process, our products, and what we guarantee, feel free to reach out. Our website link is in the description. We're happy to help drill down and explain exactly the differences between them and what you're going to be getting. Thanks for watching.